We're back at it again. This seemed interesting to me compared to the Nelk boys, who obviously were unqualified to talk with Netanyahu. Apparently, there's tough questions asked here. For me, when it comes down to it, I've already spoken about this in length in terms of my thoughts about Israel Palestine. It's much more nuanced than people are perceiving, and people are getting pretty radicalized on both sides. But I do think you could definitely say Netanyahu has more nefarious, intentions moving forward.
Before we get to that, though, what I really want to ask you about is October the 7th, and you had a very strange and unique experience that very few human beings have ever had, which is being in charge of a country of 10 million people when it's attacked in this horrific way. And since October the 7th, your forces have obviously taken control of significant swathes of Gaza. Your intelligence operatives have secured caches of documents and information.
I'm going to skip this part too, because they did, I think they let go and fire the people that was responsible. So, I mean, they already have a scapegoat for that. So we'll move on from that. Was Israel allowing? All right, so this one should be interesting. Let's go.
Before Francis takes over, I have one more question. I think even your worst critics wouldn't deny the incredible success you have had in taking down the Iranian proxies and Iran's capabilities itself. But one of the things that we have heard here in the West, and I wanted to get your perspective on it, is that in the run-up to what happened on October 7th, for many, many years, Israel was allowing, the Israeli government was allowing Qatar to pump money into Hamas and using that, in effect, to strengthen Hamas against the Palestinian Authority to prevent a united Palestinian state. What do you say to those claims?
Well, I think it's hogwash. I mean, we're stuck with Hamas. I was actually against leaving Gaza and resigned from the government when it did so, when it decided to tear out the settlements, because I said this will be overtaken by Hamas, and Hamas will use it as a platform, will use Gaza, a de facto Palestinian state in Gaza, to pellet us with missiles and rockets, the surrounding cities. And this was poo-pooed by the government at the time. I thought it was insane. But once they gave up Gaza, that's exactly what happened. Hamas took it over and turned it into a terror bastion. And the question was, what do you do with it? Well, there were various theories. One of it was that you have to aid the civilian population in such a way that you don't have diseases. So you've got to take care of the sewage, you've got to take care of electricity, you've got to make sure there's no famine there. And that was the policy that advocated giving money, which was partial money, by the way. Of all the money, the billions that went into Gaza, this was a fraction, and it was monitored. So it didn't really make the difference. And it also, what did they do with the billions that they got? Not from Qatar. The billions that they got, they built a terror city underneath, terror tunnels. Have you been to Gaza? Have you seen it?
No.
You're both welcome to come, and I'll make sure that you have a chance to see it. But you got to see the unseen underground city that they did. So they built tunnels with the vast aid that they got from elsewhere. I didn't believe that Hamas was going to make peace with us. I thought Hamas had to be constantly cut back. I myself, of the 4 military operations that we had since the rise of Hamas, since its takeover of Gaza, I led 3 operations to cut them down, not to accommodate them, killed some of their senior leaders. But there was a question whether we had the consensus, both national and international, to go into Gaza and wipe them out. And the answer was, we didn't have it. After October 7th, that changed. We had that consensus, at least for a while, until the Western leaders buckled. But that doesn't change our understanding that we have to get rid of Hamas.
Did you know about the terror tunnels before October the 7th? Were you aware that they were building them?
Yes, of course. We knew. We didn't know the full extent because it's underground and there are limited ways. I think Israel has.
It's quite clear what Netanyahu is going to be trying to do moving forward. He's going to try to shape, obviously not shape. Hamas is evil. Like, the people who try to sympathize with Hamas, you're not a good person. Very simple. However, he's going to characterize the entire struggle with Hamas at the forefront, which does not connect to the pro-Palestinian causes worries. Is like, okay, but there's innocent civilians paying for what is going on. So this could be one or two things. One, he doesn't have a good answer to address how he's going to deal with innocent Palestinians, or he doesn't care. And then the second thing about it is that maybe he just thinks that most of Palestinians are in line with Hamas. So I don't know.
Very good intelligence, but intelligence is collection, and that is always limited. And then you have to have your assessments. That is also limited. Yes, did we know about underground tunnels? Of course, yeah, we know it. Yeah.
Prime Minister, you've just used the words, the Western leaders buckled, and I'm assuming what you're referring to is Keir Starmer's statement on the 25th of July, where he said that the UK would recognise a Palestinian state.
Sorry, I'm going to have to speed it up.
What is your response to that? And do you think that was just going to essentially encourage Hamas to continue their resistance?
Yeah, of course it does. I mean, look, they commit the greatest savagery against Jews since the Holocaust. And the Prime Minister of Britain says, we'll reward you with a de facto state, which is what? Which is committed openly to repeating the October 7th massacre over and over and over again. And they say, well, no, look, we recognize Israel's right to defend itself. You know, they always add that. You hear that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of
okay.
course.
Well, they recognize Israel's right to defend itself as long as Israel doesn't exercise that right. So now let's imagine what would be the response of Britain if, well, in your case, about 15,000 people or 10,000 people would be butchered in one day, and you'd have, I don't know, 2,500 hostages taken. You know, would you say, oh, well, we should give our attackers a state right next to London? Of course not. What would the Americans say if you had 50,000 Americans butchered, okay, and thousands of Americans taken hostage?
The difference, and this is why this is not analogous to the situation that you're providing, is that Hamas is a organization, but does not represent all of the Palestinian people. That's the difference. Gaza is not Hamas territory. The entire country is not just Hamas, or the entire location is not just Hamas. So that's where the disconnect is, because, you know, they are benefiting and using fear-mongering tactics and using Palestinian civilians as leverage to make people empathetic to their cause and making them push back Israel so Israel does not fight as hard as they can. So Hamas is using the Palestinian civilians, and the Palestinian civilians don't have as much resources, don't have the means to fight back. They don't really have anybody to go to. So this is not a perfect situation, because you want to go here and take out Hamas, but at the same time, Palestinians are suffering for everything that is happening. So you can't just treat this as like they're all just the enemy.
Obviously, they'd say, no, we're not going to give them a state, sort of not in New Jersey, but right in Manhattan. You know, that's ridiculous. So what the standard that is being applied is not merely wrong; it's just downright dangerous, because you're really rewarding these monstrous terrorists with the greatest prize, and that's because of weakness. It's weakness. It's weakness in the face of distorted media, of packed social.
I wouldn't say it's weakness. I would say that it's not just getting a state, but it's also establishing a like permanent peace deal, because it's obvious you guys just want full control of that area based off how you guys have been acting. So you guys are not good actors here either. So it would just make sense. I mean, to have like a negotiated, because, you know, certain Hamas people don't want to be under the guise of oh my goodness, sorry about that. I'm playing Madden while I'm doing this. They don't want to be under control of Israel. They don't want to just be a part of it, or they want to have some kind of negotiated deal. But it's hard when you go like, you know what, Hamas, we're going to destroy everybody. We don't want any deal. And I don't care if the PA is in charge. Like, there has to be some negotiation. And I'm kind of yapping. I'm sorry about this. This is what happens when you're multitasking. There has to be some level of negotiation where Israel and Palestine can work a deal, but Israel can ensure that there's a level of like reliable leadership structure there as well.
Networks packed with the bots, BOUGHT, BOTS, bots. But it's also these radical minorities which are protesting there. And by the way, you should ask Keir Starmer. Here's a suggestion. Ask him, okay? What do these protesters say about Britain? I know what they say about Israel. Israel has to be destroyed from the river to the sea. You think this is a massive continent. It's all of 30, 40 miles, okay? But what do they say about Britain? Well, Britain should go down. What do they say about the UK? And the same for the protesters in the US. They burn Israeli flags, they burn American flags, and they burn the UK flag. So they're basically a hostile minority supporting monstrosities. And I think that it's shameful the way that the Western leaders in Britain, in France, in Canada, New Zealand, the way they buckle under. They don't have, Europe has gone through the destruction of the Jews. 80 years later, that's what they have to say. They attack the Jewish state and they give a prize for those who would destroy the one and only Jewish state. Shameful.
But Prime Minister, they would say that the amount of casualties that have now been inflicted upon the Palestinian people, the suffering that the Palestinian civilians are going through, that Israel has achieved practically all of its aims. And if Israel continues to perpetuate this war, what it's going to do is it's going to radicalize the population even more so. The more population gets radicalized, the more that joins Hamas. So essentially what Israel will be trapped in is a forever war. What do you say to that argument?
I think the forever war is the opposite. I think if we leave them there and they're committed to our destruction, then you'll have a forever war. But what is happening on the ground is actually the opposite. What is happening on the ground is we now have Gazans who are fighting Hamas because they see now in the closing phase of this war, after we had to go through these 7 fronts against all the proxies and Iran itself, and now we're circling back to finish off Hamas and demolish its last stronghold in Gaza. They see hope. They say, don't let up. Gazans, they kill Hamas. They fight Hamas. They die fighting them. And they're saying, this is our final hope to free ourselves from this tyranny. This tyranny that has caused them endless suffering and has not invested a penny of the billions that they received for the people of Gaza. So quite the opposite. It's free. We're fighting. You hear the slogan, free Gaza? I agree. Free Gaza from Hamas terror. Free Gaza from Hamas tyranny. Now, as far as Israel's performance on the battlefield, this is the fraud. It's not merely the starvation fraud. It's a genocide fraud. If we wanted to commit genocide, we would have done it in one afternoon. We have the capacity, but we don't do that. Look at the way you.
So that's the sticking point. And I know a lot of people are going to get triggered, they're going to get emotional. A lot of people don't really understand the situation and they just see people dying and just assume genocide. That is just like a point. When you are ascertaining whether someone is committing genocide, there has to be an intentional, deliberate effort to get rid of the entire group of people at any means necessary. At the end of the day, there should be nothing holding you back. But at the very least, you have to recognize that Israel has the means to just annihilate Gaza, but they don't. And I know that's hard for people to hear because they're going to get emotional about it, but it is what it is. But I do think as of recently, there is less care about what happens to the Palestinian lives. And they probably want them all just to leave so they can occupy a lot more Gaza and West Bank territory. So I do think that is another thing. They want complete control. They want complete control of the area at this point, for sure.
The Allied forces fought in Fallujah. Look at the way they fought in Mosul. It took them 9 months against 3,000 terrorists. 9 months. 3,000 terrorists. We faced 10 times the number of terrorists. And what do? We call up the Palestinian civilians and we say, leave the area. Millions of text messages, millions of individual phone calls. Please get out. And Hamas stands there and tries to prevent them by shooting them, killing them. So what do you think? Is that genocide? No, it isn't. You know it isn't. And yet Israel is being blamed. And of course, the ratio of combatants to non-combatants killed is about 1.5 to 1, which is probably I think every civilian.
But I do want to be clear. It was very weird for Israel to end the ceasefire deal. That one stands out. The U.S. ended the ceasefire deal. And U.S. put a lot of pressure on the Palestinians. And it seemed like now with the whole new thing about getting more reservists and you plan to take over the entirety of Gaza, I feel like at this point, he's pretty blatant. Netanyahu doesn't want peace. He wants complete control or utter annihilation of Hamas. And I don't even think he cares about the hostages anymore. I think he just wants to get rid of Hamas or just take control of Gaza. So you're not the good guy in this situation. You have your own ambition that does not put the lives of the people at the forefront. Hamas has their own ambition that does not put the lives of the people at the forefront. So, two sides of the same coin, man. When it becomes less about the people and more about power, then that says a lot.
Death is a tragedy. We do everything we can, as no army has done in history in such dense urban warfare, to prevent it. But Israel can't be it's not really that it can't be held to a higher standard. It's held to an impossible standard. I mean, look at the Allies in World War II. You know what they did when they went into Congress? You know, Constantine, you know, what did they do? Tell me, what did they do? Did they call civilians to leave? Did they give them, caravans of food? Did anything like that happen? No.
Well, let's be honest, and this is an argument I've made myself. At the end of World War II, we flattened Germany because they made us, because we had to destroy the military infrastructure, the transportation infrastructure to actually be able to win the war. But we live in a very different age now, don't we, Prime Minister, where all the atrocities of war are instantly available to everybody around the world on social media. And that is something you said in your own press conference last week when you were asked whether Israel is winning the PR war, you said we're definitely not, and that's putting it very mildly. So that's the challenge you face now, isn't it?
Yes, but I never thought of Winston Churchill as a war criminal, but I guess he would be held as such today. But of course, it's not really towards the end of the war that you flatten Germany. When you cross the channel in Normandy and you went into the cities, just bombed these cities, tank fire, artillery fire, air fire, without giving notice or anything like that. And you did it because you had to destroy the enemy. So you're right, it's a different era. That's why we are acting differently, and we're holding ourselves to the highest standard, and yet we're being condemned by those who know better, and even saw their own troops in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Be that as it may, it's very hard to fight the deception, the lies, the starved children, the pictures of starved children who turn out to have cerebral palsy or other congenital diseases that leave them emaciated. And Israel is, of course, accused of starving children, pretty much the way that in the Middle Ages Jews were accused of killing Christian children for their blood. So what do you do against the lie that circles the earth 10 times before the truth has a chance to emerge? You have to shorten the war as speedily as possible. And frankly, we also have to do something about the algorithms and the social networks. This is a big challenge. I don't want to dismiss it. But look, we Jews have been.
I mean, I agree with the social media thing. There's not a lot of pushback here, because I think there needs to be more pushback in terms of understanding what he's doing, because at the end of the day, there are some truthful statements that he's saying that's just objectively true, but there's no recognizing your fault in this. And obviously there's a very clear underlying intent behind what Israel wants to do here. All right, let's get to this one.
A couple more questions, and I want to ask you about the future. And I know that if I say to you, well, what does the future of Gaza look like? You're going to say, we got to destroy Hamas. We agree. You're going to say, we want the hostages back. We agree. You're going to say, we got to demilitarize Gaza so they can't do October the 7th again. We agree. And then you're going to say, and then we need a civilian government in Gaza that's not hostile to Israel. And that's where you lose me, Prime Minister, because I look at the opinion polls. I look at the people celebrating October the 7th in Gaza. I look at the fact that thousands of civilians crossed into Israel on October the 7th to commit the atrocities that were committed. And I go, these people hate you. They hate you, they hate Israel, and they hate Jews. How are you going to have a peaceful coexistence with those people, particularly given the fact that, as Francis mentioned earlier, they have been very heavily radicalized, not only through the education system, but through the fact that they've been on the receiving end on Israel's war effort?
Well, I think what you're pointing out to is that you need also a program of de-radicalization. Now, has that been done in societies that have been conditioned to hate their adversaries? Yes, of course, it's been done in two places prominently, in Japan and in Germany, but it's also been done in the Middle East. I mean, there have been very noteworthy programs, successful programs of de-radicalization in some of the Gulf states, which are actually proving to be to break the this prototype of Arab societies that cannot seize the future. I'm not saying they're model democracies, mind you, they're not, but they certainly want to seize modernity and not go back to the savage and early medievalism that the Islamic fundamentalists want to drag us all to. So I think that there's a need for de-radicalization. It has to.
I mean, that sounds good, but again, you're putting a lot of onus into factors that you're not taking responsibility into. Yes, de-radicalization is going to be very important, but from my guess, the difference is that Japan and Germany had a very, very strong and obviously they had a lot of authority to implement de-radicalization inside their governments and inside their society, especially knowing that they have to move on from this to prosper as a nation. So they have the ability to control the behaviors of their people. You are trying to implement a level of control and understanding to people you do not have control over. So even if you got rid of Hamas, the only way you can de-radicalize them is if Israel takes complete control of Gaza. And I think you're kind of just outlaying your plan here is you just want Israel complete control over Gaza. Now, if Israel does have complete control, is it possible to de-radicalize? I don't know. There are Muslims in Israel, but this is this is even different from that. So you would have to implement them into society immediately, integrate them into the goods and the benefits of society immediately. But if there's a separation and distinction, then yeah, your de-radicalization effort is going to be invaluable at that point. So there, the examples, sure, but the examples you're portraying does not equate to the current situation that we have right now.
Be part of the reconstruction of Gaza. You not only reconstruct Gaza, you also de-radicalize Gaza. It's going to be a heavy lift, but it's necessary, and it can be done.
Prime Minister, final question we ask all of our guests on the show is, what is the one thing that we are not talking about as a society, and in your case, as a civilization, I would say, what are we not talking about within Western civilization that we should be talking about?
Well, three things: history, history, and history. This is an ahistorical generation that is being raised.
Yeah, most people don't know history, was sure. All right. Well, that's all I got for that. There was decent questions there, but I don't think it really challenged Netanyahu's point of view. But it is what it is. Like and subscribe. Peace.